This session is called When Translation is a Product Decision, how IHG built a localization architecture for 21 languages in every channel. And I think it's one of the most practically useful conversations we're going to have today. Because it's not about what's possible in theory, it's about what one team actually built and what they learned. I'm Andrew Sachs, VP of Product at Smartling, and I'm joined by Michelle Kerr, Director of Product Transformation at IHG Hotels and Resorts. IHG is one of the world's largest hotel companies, over 6,900 hotels, 22 brands, more than 1 million rooms globally. Michelle leads the product organization through structural transformation, the kind that happens when your systems and operating models stop scaling and you have to reset the foundations rather than keep patching on top. At IHG, she's done exactly that across content and localization, reducing website delivery timelines and costs by more than 80%. We're going to get to know how her team built a localization architecture that actually scales, why the usual assumptions about AI and translation quality tend to be wrong, and what PMs earlier in this journey should do differently. Michelle, really glad to have you here with us. I'd love for you to set the stage a bit before we dive in.
That sounds great. Thank you, Andrew. I'm so glad to be here. So let me give you guys context. As Andrew said, we have a ton of hotels, right? Nearly 7,000 at this point and growing every day. And if you imagine back to localization pre-AI, it was incredibly expensive, right? Every single word costs money and we just could not afford to translate at scale. So we came to Smartling with that problem. And we said, we have all of these hotels who need to be translated into 21 different languages. Our hoteliers create all of the content. I don't know about you guys. I don't speak 21 languages, let alone write in 21 languages. How do we solve this? And so we worked with Smartling to create AI translations that are live on the site as the content comes in. It reads the English and translates for us, and we'll kind of dive into what that looks like here at IHG because it's been a very meaningful transformation for us.
Yeah, it's such a unique situation you're in. You have all these content creators, and in addition to all the content that gets created at IHG itself, you have all the hotel owners and partners and all these people creating content. Yeah, let's see what that really looks like. So you have over 6,900 hotels across 22 brands and different content needs across guests, owners, and business and franchisees. How do you decide what content gets what translation treatment? And how does your infrastructure enforce that without it becoming a manual exercise?
It's a great question, and it's one that we've had to think about, and we still continue to evolve it. The main thing we look at is like, what is the purpose of the content, and then how sensitive or legally relevant is it, right? So for example, the average content about a hotel room or a hotel, the guests can kind of ascertain what the meaning is if it's slightly wonky, right? But when we're talking about legal content, terms and conditions, or even more creative content like our campaigns, we tend to send those through to kind of get a second level of human touch. Now, that being said, AI is getting better day in and day out. And we have found that with our AI translations products that we've built with Smartling, that the AI version of translations is more often than not beating the human version of translations in blind taste tests. So we are seeing the quality of our AI translations improve daily to the point that, you know, come this time next year, I might be standing on the stage saying we no longer use humans much at all anymore.
I think that probably will be what you'll be saying. We see that across a lot of our customers. As far as like the architecture that you have, like, is that enforced kind of at the CMS level, or what type of tooling do you have to kind of enforce some of how the translation gets the type of translation treatment you have?
It's both within the CMS and then in Smartling. So what we do is we enable the content creator in the CMS to create the content in the language of their choice. So whether it's English, French, Spanish, whatever, those go off to Smartling to then get translations. And depending on where the content originated in the CMS, it may trigger different workflows automatically within Smartling. So if I'm a hotelier who just enters my content in normally, it's going to go through AI translations. And then if I am, let's say, writing T's and C's, that might trigger a slightly different workflow within Smartling. And those are all pre-configured. The other place that we do tweak it slightly as well is for channels. So for example, on web, we might have more room to say something than we do in a mobile app, right? And so for that context as well, we also have slightly different workflows to kind of either keep the content tighter or more synced up, depending on the channel as well.
Makes sense. And you mentioned the type of translation and things is really kind of the context of where it lives. So like maybe the hotel content that someone written gets a different quality threshold versus maybe like UI elements and website content, or maybe the buttons on the mobile app.
Yeah, that's a great point. So, for example, let's take the word home, right? When I talk about home, I could be talking about my house. I could be talking about a home page. I could be talking about anything like that. That's also an area right now where we have humans in the loop. So, just to provide that extra context that AI at the very beginning of our process couldn't get, we wanted to keep humans in the loop to make sure that they were able to get the right version of home or book now or what have you. And we're constantly improving that and getting better every day with it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. You mentioned, and I think you touched on it a minute ago, something in as far as human validation, and maybe next year at this time you'll be using all AI-based content. But early on in the rollout, you mentioned something interesting about how human validators were reviewing empty content and what they were finding. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so when we first rolled this product out, obviously, it's a big change, right? Moving from humans to AI. And so we had validators in every country or every language, I guess is the better way to phrase it, provide feedback. And about 90% of the feedback flagged was on content that had been translated by humans versus the actual AI translations. And so we found that with languages being such a preferential thing, right? I might say something one way and Andrew says it the other. Neither of us are wrong. It's just our preference. That the feedback quality was more on that nature than it was on the actual, like true, like
Right.
the translations themselves were good.
Yep. Yeah, that's something that we talk a lot about as far as if the source is bad, you're probably going to end up with bad translations. And
100%.
yeah, totally. Did you have to, just out of curiosity, was there trepidation throughout the organization of switching to AI-based translations, or did you have to convince anyone?
Yes, I would say yes. I think, you know, especially with creative content, it's really important that the message that the marketing team wants to say lands. And so for them in particular, it was a harder leap into AI translations. The hoteliers were thrilled, right? They just wanted people to be able to book their hotels. And once their content was translated, it made it much easier for somebody to book a hotel. We often get the statement from our team that I may speak multiple languages, but that doesn't mean I write in multiple languages. And so
Right.
we were putting a lot of burden on them to translate this content that we've been able to take off and still retain high quality bookable content.
Got it. Makes sense. Did I guess like do the hoteliers and franchisees, do they sometimes review the content and say there's a problem or an issue, and how do you handle that?
That's a great question. They do. They are very particular about what content is displayed about their hotel, especially in language. And so we have a system set up with Smartly Managed Services where the hotels can go into our ticketing service and file a translations error ticket that gets sent to Smartly Managed Services. And the team turns it around pretty quickly, usually within a few hours, and fixes that translation on behalf of the hotel. Now, I say this like it happens frequently. On average, we only get about 50 tickets a month. And for IHG with nearly 7,000 hotels, 50 is nothing. So yeah, we're doing a really great job.
Yeah. That's amazing. I think it's interesting that that how you did build that pipeline of a way to resolve translation issues, and it's something for people to think about, and especially product teams and things where you're going to start localizing your website or your app or something that you do have to have. Everyone's going to have an opinion, and you do have to have that process in a way to handle complaints and things that need to be resolved. And as you said, kind of everything is subjective, and we all say things a little bit differently and have our preferences, and need a way to handle that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be fancy. Ours is just sending an email. Like our ticket system sends Smartly an email. So it's not a fully automated end to end. It can be very simple, just allowing people the way to provide feedback.
Yeah, makes sense. And at IHG, product and localization are separate functions. How did you structure that, and how do you hand things off between the different teams?
It's a great question. And the teams work very, very closely together. The way that it works is that my team's responsible for like the pipelines, the infrastructure, the technical, like pushing of the systems together, and then also setting up to make sure that all of those workflows that I mentioned earlier are configured in SmartLane. Our localization team more so owns our glossary, our memory, making sure that our tone of voice is well represented for each brand, that our do not translate terms are correct, et cetera. And so what I like about the way that IHG is set up is each team is doing what they do best, right? My team's not pretending to be an expert in localization, and their team's not trying to kind of get bogged down in the weeds of system setup, which is incredibly tedious for somebody who doesn't live it day in and day out.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. You said something that kind of like triggered another question. Is that I think you said you had different glossaries and things for each of the brands. So does each brand have its own kind of tone of voice and way and certain language and words that it uses? And also maybe with that, do you have different systems set up for each brand? Do they operate separately, or is everything kind of operating at the same time through the same process?
So that's actually our future. You kind of touched into where we're going at IHG. Well done. So we are in the process of expanding our AI translations to actually include tone of voice for each brand. So I would say right now our output is the IHG tone of voice. But if you've ever stayed at a Kimpton, it's a very distinct brand, right?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
Exactly. And so they'll probably be our first brand that we test their own distinct tone of voice. The brands already have their own glossaries. It's just more about training the AI that this content is coming from Kimpton, therefore translate it in this way. And the great news is that can apply to the hotel level content as well. I don't know about you. I'm not a marketer. So every time somebody talks about tone of voice, I'm like, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for your thoughts, but I don't know what that means. And this way the hoteliers don't have to think about it, right? They can write the content the way that they would naturally write it, and it will get translated using the Kimpton tone of voice or the Holiday Inn tone of voice.
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And the consistency across the brand makes sense. Like if you stay at a Kimpton in one place and you look at the webpage for one hotel and you look at it for another location, you probably expect a similar type of tone of voice and way that they're talking about each other. And
Exactly.
I'm sorry, that triggered another question just around your systems and how they're set up. IHG always seems to be adding new brands or acquiring a brand. Kimpton, I think, was probably one of those fairly recently. How do you bring on new teams and new brands into the process?
Oh gosh, we have a lot of training, but it's getting easier with AI to create our documentation for us. For new teams and new brands, we have repositories that they can go into and learn about them. And then we do, the traditional one-on-ones and whatnot. I think what's the most interesting though is when we move into new markets and we have to think about what new languages we're going to add. So for example, we recently added what I call Spain Spanish. I'm sure somebody in the localization industry is cringing right now at my use of that phrase, but we needed it to support a brand that we brought in. And so the way that we kind of convalesce around adding a new language is based on where we are looking to add new hotels. So we really focus on developing our language strategy by where our growth market pipeline is. You can imagine you spend a lot of money to build a hotel and you want to be able to read your content in the language that you speak. And so we use that strategy in terms of ramping up. We work very closely with our business development team, and they kind of guide that roadmap for us in terms of new languages or even dialects of languages.
Yep. Right. And maybe you can expand on that a little bit. Like, I think probably people watching are thinking you set up a language and it's for the number of hotel bookings you're going to get or something, which maybe is part of it, but it's beyond that. You have some different reasons to set up a language.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the hotel bookings are the obviously added side effect that kind of comes naturally with a hotel being in language. But I think the other thing is just really supporting our owners and their needs. Our goals at IHG are to make it as easy as possible to really kind of create and craft content and tell their story day in and day out. So whether that's adding AI tools to create the content in English originally or to translate the content on their behalf. That's kind of where we focus our efforts in terms of where we spend time and resources, is making their lives a lot easier. And then if you make a hotel owner's life easier, the bookings kind of come along with it.
Makes sense. When hotels come online, is someone designated there to like write the content? Like, do they have someone on staff that's set up all ahead of time, or do you have like default content that is kind of written for them?
It depends on the brand. You might imagine our more luxury brands have marketing people within the hotel. The brands that are more day-to-day and mainstream don't necessarily. And so the person who's writing the content might also be the front desk person who's checking you in. And so we would like to give them as many tools as possible to make their lives easier, especially when their native language is not English. That, the world is built around English to a certain degree. And so we try to make it easier when that's not your native language.
Yeah, makes sense. Talking about kind of the mix of translations and AI and human in the loop and all these different things. A question that comes up a lot for PMs in this journey is, why can't you just like use and especially even just talking to developers who want to just like get a translation out of Gemini or Claude and call it done or something. What's your answer to that? Like, why can't you use a general purpose AI tool?
You can. You just might spend more time with it than you would naturally want to. So I think it's really about, where do you want to spend your time and how do you want to maximize your efficiency? So what we have built with SmartLane is a whole world of translation memory and glossaries and phrases. And SmartLane spends day in and day out working with the LLMs to fine tune the way that things are translated. They have hospitality specific glossaries. They probably have glossaries for your specific industry, right? And the amount of work that SmartLane does on our behalf to make sure that the translations are of high quality, I don't have the time or bandwidth or resources to hire a team to do what SmartLane does on my behalf. So the way that I explain it to our leadership team is, yes, any LLM will translate content for you, but will it translate turkey as a country, or will it translate turkey as a bird? You just don't know. That's a pretty critical distinction that you want to get right. And so the way that I think about it is, SmartLane's like my army of people who work for me, who don't report into me and just want to make my life a little bit easier. And that is invaluable. We can't replicate that with an out-of-the-box LLM.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, people in our research team, they always say, an LLM will always return something. You don't know what it's going to return, but it will always return something. And you need something to kind of put the guardrails in and make it be more consistent and efficient and things like that. So like and if you ask it the same question 100 times, you'll probably get a different answer 100 times. So like you do want to make sure that you have those tools and guardrails in place.
Yeah, I mean, the other day I asked it, I was validating that it was not hallucinating, and I asked it when my products were launching. Keep in mind, I have no launch date for this particular project, and the LLM told me 3 launch dates for each brand, of which was brand new news to me because I hadn't planned the launch dates yet. So yes, you'll get back something. Whether it's what you wanted, it's a totally different question.
Right.
You can't read it to validate it. That's even scarier.
Yeah, exactly.
At least I can read
yeah, and thinking about like the risk that kind of goes out there, and especially at the volume that you're translating, and the risk for the brand and things is like, and there are like, I don't know how often you encounter maybe restrictions of language or things in different regions, but that's probably a big reason to also have some of these guardrails.
Yeah, no, it's a great example. So for legal reasons, we can say free breakfast everywhere except Germany. For our hotels in Germany, legal would like us to say breakfast included. I think they do not want us to imply that you, Andrew, could walk down the street in Germany and walk into a Holiday Inn Express and have a free breakfast, right? But that creates like a very interesting challenge from a localization and a translations perspective, because it's not just in German we need to say free breakfast. or breakfast included. We need to say breakfast included in every language for hotels that originate in Germany. And that just the scale of that and having all of those rules built in really helps us keep it easier or keep it clean for our product managers. They don't have to remember those rules. They're kind of built into the system.
Yeah, any way to like probably enforce those without having to have people think about it is really important. And you talked about for a minute the like the content creators, probably in the hotels and franchisees, and they are often maybe writing in their own language and not in English. How do you handle that, and how does it get turned into a language that I guess that would show up on the website?
We're in the process of building this right now, so it's very exciting. The way that we are doing it is we're letting the hoteliers go in and enter content in their language, and then it goes back through English, and then English translates out to the other remaining 20-ish languages, English being another version of that language. And so that allows those hoteliers to create content that's much more natural to them, which will make the source quality significantly better. And then we still receive the translations we need. And so we're in the process of building that right now into our new content management systems for hotels to have probably in early 2027.
Okay, yeah, that's super cool. It's also interesting how like you're constantly evolving and changing and optimizing things. How do you like decide when it's time to do something like the handling of non-English content? When is that kind of it reaches a critical point where you're like, okay, we need to start handling this differently?
Oh gosh. Part of it's when bandwidth allows, right? Whenever you get a pause and you can breathe and adjust your roadmap. But no, it's really about what the market demands at the time, kind of similar to how any product manager needs to listen to their stakeholders. Our hotel owners are our number one stakeholders, and we need to make sure that their needs are met. And so we are frequently talking to the teams that talk to hotels and hear what their needs are. And that's how we evolve our roadmap. And then we just work with SmartLane and the other teams that support, like our localization team, to make sure that they're able to help out. And we work in tandem with all those teams to develop our localization roadmap.
Got it. That makes sense. For the PMs in the audience who are kind of early in this journey, what's the decision they're most likely to defer too long, and where do things tend to break down?
Oh gosh. I would say the biggest thing is to start with your content architecture. So you want to start early with like your source language, how many variants, what needs a review, what kind of content can be AI translated, where do you want humans in the mix, what are your workflows? It's much easier to set up your infrastructure correctly the first time than it is to go back and retrofit it. Now, that being said, don't make perfection the enemy of good, right? Like you can fix things. I just think if you're looking at a world where you have 30 versions of English, you want to know that in advance, right? So that you can set up your infrastructure appropriately to support it.
Right, makes sense. And how often do you work with like the IT team or something in connecting these different services?
Daily. Your engineering teams are your best friends.
Yeah.
And getting those up and running. I would say your engineering teams and your localization teams, if you don't understand kind of the needs of the business and how they are using content to tell their story, you're going to set up systems that don't necessarily work for them. And so I say 30 Englishes, but if you think about it, if we're running a global campaign, and let's say it's the summer sale, because it's summer here in America, in Australia, that's the winter sale, but those are still both English. And so to make sure that that content is appropriately fed with those little nuances to each region is really important. And bolting on those kind of infrastructure as an afterthought can really kind of make it difficult for you.
Right, makes sense. Yeah, I think like, and obviously IHG is a huge organization and very complex, and you have a very unique situation with how content gets created and localized, and the global nature of it is truly different probably than most other organizations. And I'm curious how long like your role has been in existence? Like you're director in digital transformation. How long have you kind of been in that position, and how did it kind of get started?
It's a great question. Only a couple of years. So I would say it's a self-invented role. If you see it, you
Not
can believe it and you can achieve it. The really what happened is in my role, I previously managed hotel websites, which is kind of how I started dipping my toes into translations and localization. But we kept finding ways that we could improve it. And so what we decided to do was take and say all of these things that are going to take a few years or more to build, let's put those in one area and then let's let another team focus on the day in and day out. Now, that being said, to your point, IHG is a really, really large organization. And so there's enough bandwidth to kind of create that separation of church and state. Most people don't have that, right? You're kind of running along and transforming while you're also driving the car. I would say for the people who are more in that role, start small, dip your toe in, like pick one language or one locale and try it out. Find a friend who speaks Spanish and have them review the content. Like, don't be afraid to just test drive it, because you never know what's going to land and what's not going to land. You can always roll it back. That's the great thing about it.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I guess that's kind of on that, as far as one thing in your journey on this, like what's one thing that you wish you had known at the start, or maybe done differently at the start?
I think the one is the source quality that we kind of touched on earlier. Making sure that source quality is good is really important. But I also think that the localization and product owner, kind of product manager, is not as obvious as you would think. It makes total sense when I say it to you right now, but I think a lot of organizations tend to say the person who manages localization also manages all of the systems and technology, and it's just not necessarily the same skill set. And so making that division within IHG has actually helped us quite a bit in terms of creating a higher quality product that works better for the entire org.
Makes sense. All right, one final question. Looking ahead, what are you most excited about or paying closest attention to in the localization space right now?
Oh gosh, it's got to be the quality of the translations that are coming out and the ability to do tone of voice and everything. It's changing daily. I feel like I wake up every morning and there's a new bit of information about AI news. But for us at IHG, I think it's really about how can we make the brands really sing with the way that they like to speak about themselves, the way they like to speak about their hotels, and how can we infuse that throughout the entire infrastructure?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, the speed at which things are changing. I'm right with you on that. Like the quality that you're getting now will be considerably different than the quality that you'll be getting in a year, and it's really exciting to see how all these changes are unfolding and how quickly it's happening.
Exactly.
Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a great talking to you, and thank you for all the information and advice. Really appreciate it.